Universal fear. Humans created monsters because reality bored us. Part 1. Doctor stared at the data screen in her laboratory, her four eyes blinking in sequence as she had done countless times over the past 6 months. Each blink brought the same result. The numbers didn't change. The pattern remained, and the implications terrified her more than anything she had encountered in her 40 years of studying fear across the galaxy. She was a psychologist, regarded as one of the finest minds in. Her species had mapped the fear responses of over 200 spacefaring civilizations. They understood what made the warlike shudder, what nightmares haunted the peaceful, what ancient terrors the elders still whispered about in their spawning pools. Fear was universal. Fear was predictable. Fear came from real threats, real memories, real dangers that species had faced and survived. Until humanity initiated the presentation sequence one more time, watching as holographic images filled her laboratory. Ancient human cave paintings appeared first, depicting creatures that never existed. Humans huddled around fires, telling stories of monsters lurking in darkness. Not memories of real predators, but invented ones. Spirits, demons, things with too many teeth and not enough mercy. The timeline advanced. Medieval manuscripts showed dragons that never flew, vampires that never fed, demons that never crawled from any hell because no hell existed. Renaissance art depicted devils and angels locked in cosmic battles that never happened. Modern human cinema created endless variations of the same theme. Monsters, aliens, ghosts, killers, things under beds and in closets and waiting in the dark. Other species had stories too. The told tales of the great swimmer, the massive predator that had hunted their ancestors for. But the great swimmer had been real. Its fossilized bones littered oceans. They sang songs of the dark time when their sun had dimmed and their people nearly froze. But the dark time had happened. Their historians had documented every painful year. Humans were different. Humans invented fears. Had spent months confirming this finding. She'd analyzed thousands of human stories, interviewed hundreds of human subjects, consulted with human historians and anthropologists and psychologists. The conclusion was inescapable and unprecedented. Humanity was the only known species in the Galactic Academic Consortium that deliberately created horrors for entertainment. She pulled up her interview with a human named Sarah Martinez, a writer from Earth. The human's face appeared on the screen, smiling with that peculiar expression humans made when they were pleased. "Why do you write horror?" the recorded voice asked. "Because it's fun," Sarah had answered, as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. "But you create scenarios designed to produce fear. You imagine ways people could suffer and die. You invent monsters specifically to terrify your audience. This brings you pleasure." "Sure does. Scaring people is a rush. Making them feel something intense, something that gets their heart racing. That's what good horror does." Had pressed further. "But these monsters you create, the vampires, the zombies, the demons, they aren't real. They never threatened your species. Why spend cognitive resources imagining threats that don't exist?" Sarah had laughed at that. Humans laughed frequently, had learned, often at questions other species found perfectly reasonable. "Maybe that's exactly why we do it," Sarah had said. "Real life isn't scary enough." That response had stopped cold. Real life wasn't scary enough. For a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, predators, and near-extinction events, reality apparently failed to provide adequate fear. So humans made their own. The laboratory door chimed. Opened it to find Ambassador waiting, his crystalline form refracting the corridor lights into rainbow patterns. "The consortium has assembled," said. "They're waiting for your presentation." Gathered her data chips, her hands trembling slightly. Noticed. His species noticed everything. "You're afraid," he observed. "Of what? The data?" "Of what it means," answered. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Academic Consortium held representatives from 47 different species, stood at the central podium, looking up at the tiered seating that rose in all directions. Hundreds of eyes, in every configuration biology allowed, focused on her. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "I have completed my study of human fear psychology. My findings are disturbing." She activated the holographic display. Images of human monsters filled the air above the assembly. Vampires with extended fangs, zombies with rotting flesh, demons with twisted faces, aliens with acid blood, ghosts passing through walls, serial killers with knives, things that crawled, slithered, flew, and hunted through every nightmare humanity had ever conceived. "These are human monsters," explained. "None of them are real. None of them ever existed. Humans created every single one through pure imagination." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A delegate raised one tentacle. "Surely these are based on real threats, predators from Earth's evolutionary history." "No," answered. "I checked. Earth had dangerous predators, yes. Large cats, bears, venomous creatures, but humans didn't tell stories about those. They invented new things to fear. Vampires that drink blood and never die. Zombies that spread infection through bites. Werewolves that transform under moonlight. These have no basis in Earth's biological history." A representative stood, her light form pulsing with confusion. "Then where did these concepts originate?" "From boredom," said simply. "Humans looked at reality and found it insufficient, so they made their own." The assembly erupted in discussion, waited for the noise to subside before continuing. "I have documented over 50,000 distinct monster types in human creative works. They span every era of human civilization. Cave paintings, oral traditions, written texts, visual media, interactive simulations. Humans have spent more collective cognitive resources imagining fictional threats than any species has spent remembering real ones." She pulled up a comparison chart. "They have 3 traditional fear stories, all based on actual historical events. They have 7, all tied to documented environmental disasters. They have 21, all derived from real military defeats. Humans have thousands upon thousands, and 98% have no connection to actual threats their species faced." A military advisor, his armor clicking as he moved, posed the question had been dreading. "What does this mean for humanity's psychological profile? Are they unstable, delusional?" "No," said. "That's what makes this truly disturbing. Humans are psychologically healthy by every metric we use. They're successful, adaptive, and thriving. This isn't a disorder, it's a feature." She advanced to the next section of her presentation. "I interviewed human creators extensively. Writers, filmmakers, game designers. I asked them why they do this. Why create monsters? Why imagine horror? Why spend time and energy on fears that aren't real?" A human's voice filled the chamber. It was Thomas, a filmmaker had interviewed on Earth. "We do it because we can," Thomas's recorded voice said. "We looked at the universe and saw everything followed rules. Physics, biology, chemistry, everything was limited, everything was predictable. We found that boring. So we asked ourselves, what if the rules were different? What if dead things could walk? What if some humans could transform into beasts? What if creatures from other dimensions could break through into ours?" Reality said no. We said, let's pretend yes. Pause the recording. "Do you understand what this means? Humans don't just accept reality as it is. They actively reject it as insufficient. They see a universe bound by natural law and decide they need more. More fear, more excitement, more meaning, more everything." The assembly sat in stunned silence. "There's more," continued. "This isn't limited to fear. Humans create fictional romances that transcend death, fictional heroes with impossible powers, fictional worlds where magic replaces physics, fictional futures where they've conquered the stars. Reality provides a baseline and humans immediately ask, what could be better? What could be worse? What could be more interesting? She displayed statistics on human creative output: billions of books, millions of films, countless games and stories and songs and artworks, all of them pushing beyond what was real into what could be imagined. Other species create art about their experiences, explained. Humans create art about experiences they wish they could have, or fear they might have, or hope they'll never have. They don't just document reality, they build alternatives to it. Ambassador stood, his crystalline form chiming softly. Doctor, what do you conclude from this? Is humanity a threat? Looked at the assembled delegates, her four eyes meeting as many gazes as she could. I don't know, she admitted. But I know this. We're dealing with a species that looked at the entire universe and decided it wasn't enough. A species that got bored with reality and built their own. A species that creates monsters for fun. She took a breath, her voice dropping lower. What happens when their imagination runs out of fictional targets? What happens when reality finally gives them something real to fear? Will they be prepared? Or will they try to turn it into another story? The assembly had no answers, neither did. But somewhere in the back of her mind, a thought kept circling. Humans had spent thousands of years practicing for threats that didn't exist. They'd imagined every possible nightmare. They'd created monsters specifically designed to be unbeatable, then spent even more time imagining how to beat them anyway. If something real and terrible ever did arrive, humanity would face it with a practice fighting fictional horrors. Wasn't sure if that made her feel better or worse. Part 2. 3 months after his presentation, the Galactic Academic Consortium launched the Human Psychology Initiative. 17 research teams, representing 12 different species, descended upon Earth and human colonies throughout settled space. Their mission was simple in concept and terrifying in scope: understand why humans created monsters and what it revealed about humanity's true nature. Doctor led Team 7, stationed on Earth itself. She'd chosen 6 human volunteers from various creative fields: writers, filmmakers, game designers, artists. Each week, they gathered in a converted warehouse in what humans called Seattle, sitting in a circle while her assistant, a named Brightness of Dawn, asked questions that seemed simple but carried weight. Tell me about zombies, said during the 4th session. A game designer in his 30s leaned forward. Zombies are great because they hit multiple fears at once: death, disease, loss of self, being overwhelmed by numbers. Plus they're former humans, which adds emotional weight. You might have to destroy someone you knew. But they don't exist, pressed. You know they cannot exist. Dead tissue cannot reanimate. It's biologically impossible. Sure, agreed. But that's not the point. The point is asking, what if it could? What if the rules were different? What would that be like? How would we survive? Another volunteer, an elderly woman named who wrote horror novels, added her perspective. We're not trying to predict reality. We're exploring possibility. Every monster is a thought experiment. Vampires ask, what if immortality required consuming others? Werewolves ask, what if our bestial nature was literal? Ghosts ask, what if death wasn't the end? Made notes on her. But other species have thought experiments too. We run simulations. We test hypotheses. We don't create entertainment around existential dread. Maybe you should, said Lee, a filmmaker. It's useful. When you face fictional fears enough times, real fears become manageable. I've written 23 disaster scenarios: pandemics, earthquakes, invasions, system failures. If any of those happen for real, I'd be better prepared than someone who never thought about them. So you create monsters to prepare for reality? Brightness of Dawn asked, her light pulsing with interest. Sometimes, said, but mostly we do it because reality doesn't give us enough. Life is mundane. We wake up, work, eat, sleep, and eventually die. That's true for everyone in the universe. But humans looked at that and said, no, we need more. We need stories where dead gods wake up, where ordinary people get superpowers, where love survives beyond death, where tiny humans defeat enormous evils. Reality wasn't giving us that, so we made it ourselves. This became the pattern observed across all 17 research teams. Humans didn't create monsters because they were disturbed or traumatized. They created monsters because they needed more than the universe naturally provided. Team 3, studying human romance literature, reported that humans invented love stories that violated natural law, eternal devotion, love that transcended death, time, and dimension. Real human relationships, while often fulfilling, were messy and finite, so humans imagined better ones. Team 9, analyzing human adventure fiction, found humans constantly inventing impossible journeys, dragons to slay, treasures to find, worlds to save, magic to wield. Real human life rarely provided such clear purpose and dramatic stakes, so humans created fictional lives that did. Team 12, studying human war stories, discovered something particularly fascinating. Humans had experienced enough real war to fill libraries with tragedy, but they didn't just document real conflicts. They invented bigger ones: space battles, magic warfare, conflicts between gods, wars for the fate of universes. Real war was horrible and senseless. Fictional war gave horror meaning and made sacrifice noble. The pattern was undeniable. Humans saw reality as a starting point, not a conclusion. Compiled the findings into a comprehensive report. She scheduled another presentation to the consortium, but this time she invited human representatives to attend. If the galaxy was going to understand humanity, humans should speak for themselves. The assembly hall filled again. This time, 5 humans stood beside at the podium. She recognized the nervousness in their body language. Humans often felt uncertain when representing their entire species to alien civilizations, but they'd all volunteered. Honored delegates began. 3 months ago, I presented evidence that humans create monsters because reality bores them. Today, I'm here to refine that conclusion. With me are 5 human creators who will explain their species' relationship with fiction. She stepped aside, approached the podium first. I write horror novels, said, her voice steady despite addressing dozens of alien species. I've written 43 books about monsters, killers, and cosmic nightmares. People ask me why I spend my life imagining terrible things. The answer is simple. Reality gave us one universe with one set of rules. We decided that wasn't enough, so we built more. She gestured, and the holographic display showed covers from her books, creatures with impossible anatomy, scenarios that violated physics, terrors that couldn't exist. Every human creator is doing the same thing. We're building alternative universes. Some are better than ours, some are worse, but all of them give us something reality can't. When I write about an ancient evil waking up, I'm not predicting the future. I'm exploring a possibility. What if such a thing existed? How would humans react? Would we survive? Could we win? Lee spoke next. I make disaster films. Earthquakes that split continents, storms that destroy cities, invasions from hostile species. None of these are impossible exactly. Earth has earthquakes and storms. Hostile species exist in the galaxy, but I make them bigger, worse, more dramatic, because reality's version isn't interesting enough. Followed, I design games where players fight zombies, aliens, demons, and worse. Players die thousands of times learning how to win. They practice tactics against enemies that don't exist. And you know what? It makes them better thinkers, better problem solvers. They've faced impossible situations in fiction, so real problems seem manageable. The fourth human, a young artist named, showed his work. Paintings of impossible landscapes, creatures that couldn't evolve, cities that engineering. Humans are artists, he said. We look at what is and immediately imagine what could be. That's not a disorder, that's our greatest strength. The final human, a writer named Samuel, spoke last. Other species see the universe as it is. Humans see it as it could be. You're right that we create monsters, but we also create heroes. We imagine love stronger than death, friendships that span galaxies, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We don't just invent horrors, we invent hope. Return to the podium. This is what my research has concluded. Humans don't create fiction because they're detached from reality. They create fiction because they refuse to be limited by it. They see natural law as a suggestion, not a constraint. They look at the impossible and ask, why not? A delegate raised a tentacle. But how does this make them successful? Fantasy doesn't build starships. Imagination doesn't win wars. Samuel answered before could. Doesn't it? Every human achievement started as imagination. Someone looked at the sky and imagined flying. Someone looked at the stars and imagined reaching them. Someone looked at a disease and imagined a cure. Reality said no to all of those things initially. We did them anyway. Your species accepts the universe as it is, added. Humans accept it as the starting point. Everything we've built started because someone imagined something that didn't exist yet, then made it real. The assembly murmured, could see the delegates processing this, understanding dawning. This explains human behavior across multiple domains, continued. Human diplomacy constantly proposes solutions others call impossible. Human engineering regularly achieves things that violate conventional wisdom. Human military tactics consistently surprise enemies who think logically. It's all the same pattern. Humans refuse to accept limitations. She pulled up statistics. Humans have been in the Galactic Consortium for only 47 years. In that time, they've proposed 233 innovations other species called impossible. 71 have been implemented. 23 fundamentally changed their respective fields. Like the drive, Brightness of Dawn added. Everyone said faster-than-light travel couldn't improve beyond existing methods. Human engineer Maria said, what if the rules were different? She built her drive on principles she admitted she partly invented through thought experiments. It worked. Now most new ships use her design. Or the Accords said, the and the had been at war for 6 generations. Every diplomat said peace was impossible, too much history, too much hatred. Human negotiator David said, what if we rewrote the terms entirely? He invented a framework that had never been tried because conventional wisdom said it wouldn't work. It did. The war ended. The assembly fell silent. They were beginning to understand. Humans are dangerous, said quietly. Not because they're aggressive, not because they're strong, but because they refuse to accept reality as absolute. They see the universe and immediately ask, how can we make this better? How can we break these rules? What happens if we try the impossible? She looked at the 5 humans standing beside her. They create monsters because reality bored them, but they create heroes for the same reason. They create love stories because real love isn't dramatic enough. They create adventures because real life lacks clear purpose. They create everything they wish was real but isn't. And sometimes, Samuel said softly, we make those things real. We imagined flying. Then we built wings. We imagined curing disease. Then we invented medicine. We imagined reaching the stars. Then we built ships. Everything starts as impossible. Everything starts as fiction, until humans decide to make it real. The session ended without conclusions. The delegates needed time to process what they'd learned, but stood in the empty assembly hall afterward, thinking about the implications. Humans had spent building alternative universes in their heads, practicing for scenarios that didn't exist, fighting monsters that weren't real, solving problems that had never occurred. What would happen when something real and terrible arrived? Would humans be ready? Or would they try to turn reality into another story? Suspected she already knew the answer. Part 3. They arrived 6 months after second presentation. They came from dark space beyond the galactic rim, a region no one had properly surveyed because nothing lived there. No stars, no planets, no resources, just empty void. That proved that assumption wrong. First contact happened at the outer colony of Theta 7. The colony had 12,000 residents, mostly with some inhuman traders. It had farms, factories, schools, and art galleries. When the Galactic Defense Network detected the fleet approaching, the colony administrator tried standard first contact protocols, broadcasting greetings in 40 languages, displaying mathematical proofs of intelligence, transmitting cultural exchange packages. They responded by consuming everything. They weren't a fleet in the traditional sense. They were a swarm, millions of organic ships, each the size of a transport vessel, moving in perfect coordination. They fell upon Theta 7 like locusts on grain. The colony's shields held for 17 minutes. Then they failed. What happened next was recorded by automated beacons before those two were destroyed. They ate metal, they ate stone, they ate organic matter. They ate the colony down to bedrock, absorbed every atom, and moved on. 12,000 people disappeared in 3 hours. No survivors, no remains, nothing but an empty crater where a city had stood. The Galactic Defense Council met in emergency session, watched the meeting from Earth where she'd remained to continue her research. The council included representatives from every major military power in the galaxy, generals, admirals, strategic thinkers, and for the first time, human commanders. Admiral Jessica represented the human delegation. She was 62, haired, with eyes that had seen combat. She listened while other species presented their analysis of the threat. "They're a hive mind," a admiral explained. "Millions of individual units sharing one consciousness, perfect coordination, no internal conflict, no communication lag. They consume everything for resources," a general added. "They don't negotiate, they don't trade. They exist only to expand and devour. We've seen this pattern before. Extinction-level predator species. Evolution created them to be perfect killing machines." 6 civilizations, a strategist said, her light dim with grief. "We've confirmed 6 spacefaring species that encountered the before us. None survived. They left no trace. They consumed entire worlds." The council reviewed tactical simulations. Every major military power had run the scenarios, fleet engagements, defensive positions, hit-and-run tactics, scorched earth strategies. Every simulation ended the same way. They adapted, they learned, they consumed, they won. "They've had millions of years of evolution," the admiral said. "They've optimized for one thing, consuming other species. They've seen every natural defense mechanism, every predator evasion strategy, every survival tactic that evolution can produce. Nothing surprises them." Admiral had been silent throughout the briefing. Now she spoke for the first time. "Have they seen anything evolution didn't produce?" The council turned to look at her. The admiral's tentacles writhed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "You said they've seen every defense evolution created, every natural strategy, every logical response." Leaned forward. "Have they seen an unnatural one?" The council stared. They didn't understand. Watching from Earth felt something cold slide down her spine. She understood. Continued. "We've been running the same simulations you have. We agree with your conclusions. Conventional warfare fails. Logical tactics fail. Everything evolution taught us about combat fails. They have spent millions of years becoming perfect at beating anything that evolved naturally." She pulled up a new display. Human ships, human weapons, human tactical formations. None of them looked right. They violated standard military doctrine. They used formations that shouldn't work. They employed weapons that seemed inefficient. "But we're not natural," said quietly. "Not anymore. Humans spent the last 10,000 years imagining threats that don't exist, then practicing how to beat them. We've fought zombies in our fiction, hive minds, planet-consuming horrors, aliens that adapt to any attack, cosmic nightmares that can't be killed." But those were fictional, a council member protested. Yes, agreed. Which means we created tactics that evolution never would. We made strategies that don't follow natural logic. We invented weapons that shouldn't work but do because we refuse to accept impossible as an answer. She highlighted specific systems. Vampiric ships. They go dark, hide in debris fields or behind asteroids, then strike without warning and drain the target's power. Not efficient by conventional standards, but they terrify enemies because predator-prey instincts say attackers should be visible. Another system appeared. Zombie weapons that infect biomass and turn it against them. They spread through physical contact, converting consumed matter into aggressive cells that attack their own swarm. Evolutionary instinct says consumed matter is safe. These violate that assumption. More weapons. Psychological warfare based on Lovecraftian horror. Broadcasts designed to cause fear in hive minds. Yes, hive minds. We theorized that perfect coordination requires perfect trust. Break that trust and the whole system collapses. We've spent 100 years writing stories about cosmic horrors that break human minds. We applied those same principles. The council sat in stunned silence. They'd never seen warfare like this. It didn't follow any logical pattern. Will it work? The admiral finally asked. I don't know, admitted. But they have never faced it. They've spent millions of years fighting species that evolved naturally, that used logical tactics, that followed predictable patterns. They're about to fight a species that spent practicing against fictional enemies, using tactics that make no evolutionary sense. The Council authorized humanity's plan. They had no better options. The battle happened at the colony world of New Harmony. 4 million people. 60%, 30% human, 10% mixed others. The fleet approached, expecting another easy meal. They found a human fleet waiting. Watched the battle from a command observation post, standing beside brightness of dawn. The human fleet numbered only 200 ships against millions of units. It should have been a slaughter. The human ships went dark, all of them. No power signatures, no heat, no movement. They drifted like debris. The swarm moved forward. They'd seen this tactic before. Species hiding, hopping predators would pass by. It never worked. They had sensors that detected life even without power. Then the human ship struck. They'd been waiting in asteroid fields, behind moons, inside gas clouds. They emerged without warning and latched onto units like vampires onto prey. They drained power, absorbed resources, and disappeared back into darkness before the swarm could respond. They adapted. They began moving in formations, protecting each other. Standard hive mind tactics worked perfectly against natural predators. The humans deployed zombie weapons, spread through physical contact, infecting biomass. The infected units began attacking their neighbors. The swarm tried to purge them, but the infection spread faster. Evolutionary instinct said absorbed resources were safe to incorporate. They violated that rule. They adapted again. They isolated infected units and destroyed them. But this took time and coordination. The human vampiric ships used those moments to strike again. Then the humans deployed their psychological weapons. Didn't understand how they worked. Something about patterns in electromagnetic radiation that interfered with hive mind communication. The broadcasts caused confusion, fear. Individual units broke formation. Evolutionary instinct said the hive was safety. The broadcasts made them fear the hive itself. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 70% of the units were destroyed. The rest retreated back to dark space. For the first time in their species' existence, they'd encountered prey that frightened them. Admiral addressed the council afterward. They'll come back, she warned. They'll adapt to our tactics. Evolution will do its work, but they can't adapt to chaos. They can't predict what evolution never produced. Every time they think they understand us, we'll use a new tactic from another story. How many stories do you have? a general asked. Millions answered. We've been writing them for 10,000 years. War stories, horror stories, fantasy battles, science fiction conflicts. We've imagined every possible way to fight and die. They have seen every natural strategy. They've never seen unnatural ones. Finally understood what made humanity terrifying. They were a species that got bored with reality and spent inventing alternatives. They created monsters for entertainment. They imagined horrors for fun. They practiced fighting impossible enemies because reality didn't provide enough challenge. When something real and terrible finally arrived, humanity was ready. Not because they'd predicted it, but because they'd already imagined worse and learned how to win anyway. She updated her research with final conclusions. Humanity didn't create monsters because reality bored them, exactly. They created monsters because on some deep, instinctual level, they knew that one day reality would need impossible solutions. So they spent thousands of years practicing. Other species evolved naturally. They developed traits that helped them survive their environments. They became what evolution needed them to be. Humans evolved, then decided evolution was too slow. So they practiced against threats that didn't exist, using tactics that made no logical sense, preparing for a future that probability said would never come. Except it did come, and humanity was ready. They attacked twice more over the next year. Each time, humans used different tactics, strategies pulled from fantasy novels, weapons inspired by horror films, battle formations from video games, nothing that had evolved to fight. By the third retreat, the stopped coming. They'd learned what humans had known for. Reality wasn't the limit. Imagination was, and humans had more imagination than the universe had prepared them to face. His final report to the Galactic Academic Consortium was simple. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or tactics. It was their refusal to accept reality as absolute. They saw the universe and said, this isn't enough. So they built alternatives. They created monsters, heroes, and everything between. They practiced fighting nightmares that didn't exist. And when reality finally presented a real nightmare, humanity treated it like another story, one they'd been practicing to write for 10,000 years. The galaxy learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that got bored with reality and decided to practice against fictional threats. Because when something real finally arrives, that species will have already imagined it, fought it, and figured out how to win. Reality bored humans, so they invented better ones. And sometimes, those better realities included solutions the universe never would have created on its own. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not technology, not military power, but the simple, terrifying ability to look at the impossible and say, let's try it anyway.